talk is it's unlocking the potential of JAMStack, being able to use Vue and Nuxt, and then marry that with the content that comes from Adobe Experience Manager. Let's see. So JAMStack, it's an architecture it's for making the web faster. So you know, as everybody shifted to more dynamic sites, JAMStack takes an alternative route, and it's usually generating static content and being able to host that, which makes it faster. It's more secure. It's harder to, you know, to be able to do cross-site scripting and those things when your website is static. And you can scale it. You can scale it in many different ways. If you're interested, you know, jamstack.org talks about some of the benefits. You can get improved performance because you're not dynamically creating the page. The page is already pre-generated, and it's sitting on a CDN and ready to return to the server. That doesn't mean because it's static doesn't mean that you can't have a dynamic site. It just means that the assets that you're using, HTML and JavaScript and the CSS, that those are all pre-rendered on the server and generated and then pushed to a HTTP server. To enhance security, like I said, you know, there's no way to, since they're static, there's no way for a hacker to be able to break into them and be able to provide their content. It's scalable. Especially like with a CDN, you can have your assets as close as you want to your users and be able to bring on a lot more than if you had to have the whole stack all the way back to the database. It's a better developer experience. You can do rapid. You can actually prototype and get things running a lot faster, and it's definitely more cost effective. Like I said, transitions are slow. Characteristics. It's a decoupled architecture, so the front end and the back end are happen at different points in the life cycle. So the back end is all used during development, and then it's only front end during you know, in production. Like I said, a static site generation, JavaScript. Most of them are JavaScript API driven and, you know, hosted on a CDN. There's many different ways to do JAMStack. The three most popular here are Vue with Nuxt, and React has Next. Next actually was created first, and Nuxt came out of you know, they copied Next in order to use it with Vue, and Angular started incorporating what Next was doing in their Angular Universal version.
Hey, Gordon, just one quick thing. I don't know if you should be sharing the screen or not, but
is it not?
No, it's not. Okay.
I'm sorry.
Pretty sure. Like, okay, that makes sense. And thank you for all the guys that pinged me.
Okay, can you see it now?
Okay. Yeah.
Okay, good.
Now it makes more sense. Thank you.
And I'll make this stack all available afterwards as well. Thanks. So Nuxt in Vue, it's an open source framework. As opposed to React, which is hosted by, started and hosted by Facebook. Nuxt was truly open source. I mean, Vue is truly open source. Nuxt as well, and they work pretty well together, and they're simple and powerful. Vue 3's come out, and then Nuxt has version 3 that corresponds with Vue 3. The benefits of Nuxt, it's server-side rendering, brings server-side rendering capabilities, automatic code splitting. It's easy to config. It's built upon, it works, it is a highly opinionated framework, And so it works off of the directory structure of your code in order to generate routes and automatically generate routes. Vue, it's lightweight, it's flexible, modern. It's easy to use, and it's reactive. There's a large ecosystem around it. Not quite as large as React, but it's definitely there's definitely a lot of people around the world that's utilizing it. Headless AEM. So the benefits of using AEM in a headless manner is it can be cost effective. You lose the WYSIWYG capability, and if we have clients that want that, then that kind of headless may not be the approach that they want to take. But by taking a headless approach, you're able to use the same data across multiple different channels that you may not have out of the box with AEM. You can get better performance. We all know that that publishers and dispatchers and the authors can get highly taxed, and that adding another one to the mix is you incur costs as far as the licensing. Enhanced security. There's nothing for since it's static. The front end is static, then there's a less of a surface area for a hacker to gain access to it. It's streamlined and improves the customer experience. Just to give you an idea of the different architectures, there's many different ways that you can use AEM in a headless manner and use a JAMStack, but these are two. It kind of shows the two differences that you would see. In a more traditional AEM approach, we'd have an author, one or more authors with with two or more publishers, along with their corresponding dispatchers. These may or may not be front-ended by a CDN, and then and only then does content get to the end user. Whereas with JAMStack, we need an author, but we don't need the dispatcher or a publisher, and it's authored during development. And so the Boxer dev and CCID, the data that comes from author is only needed during the compile phase. And so at runtime, all you have is a CDN. You don't have any dependency on any of these, unless you did something whereas you wanted to, hosting of images, and which AEM does really well. You could do a more hybrid approach where you have images coming out of your DAM, and but there's many different ways that you can put those together. But this shows the extreme. With a traditional, you have one or more, like we said, the authors and publishers in the CDN, where with JAMStack, you have an author during development, and during, in prod, all you have is the CDN. So I put together a demo of a JAMStack demo using AEM, and these are the different different things within the stack, and we could talk to them, at depth at a later time. But it's an AEM author with GraphQL using 6.5.15. So we have GraphQL capabilities built in, using Vue 3 and Nuxt 3 for development of the front end, and TypeScript. And then for the styling, using Tailwind CSS and Daisy UI. Daisy UI is some built-in components built upon Tailwind CSS, so it's more convenient for instance, with headers and footers and some of those nice haves that you normally see. In our demo, we're going to, this kind of breaks out which one of these technologies work in the different levels. So on the back end, we have the author 6.5.15, and we're using content fragments, got those enabled. And to make it simple, I just utilized, reappropriated the weekend site example content, and I installed GraphQL so that we could actually see some of the graph queries and what the responses are. On the front end, it's TypeScript, Vue 3, Nuxt 3, and again, the tailwind in Daisy UI. Now, when I'm running it local, well, I'll demonstrate that we're using it in dev mode. In this, it's a normal node server, and there's no server-side rendering anything there, but then we can generate it and create a standalone HP server, host it with a HP server. And then I'll show you how we can incorporate that using AWS Amplify and push it out to S3 and be able to host a site there. Okay, so now the awesome sauce. Real quick, let's go through the code a little bit. Sorry, I got a few windows here. Now, as I said, so this is a Vue app, but it's using Nuxt. Now, Nuxt, it actually highly depends on the layout of your directory structure. So we have templates. Templates are same as JAMStack. You have a template section, you can have a script section, and you can have a style section. In here, we have a default layout, and it's just bringing in a main header and footer, and then a slot for the content that would be between each one of them. Some of the components in this application just have two components: the header, utilizing the Daisy UI header nav bar, that information in and put it in here, and then a footer which has it's a footer with the again using Daisy UI to help lay that out, and some of the links that we have here. As far as CSS, there's two different directories for your assets. Assets, things within here can be run through at compile time and like route speed change, those kind of things. That's mainly where the CSS is. But anything that's really static would be under public. And so there's the public directory here, which has our any of the content. What I did is I pulled in the images from on the AM side and put them in here so they would be within our, and then as well, these images, favorite icon, and this main CSS doesn't need to exist there. So then pages, this is where the routing takes place within Nuxt. You can have, the main entry point would be index. And so index.view for view files. And again, this is a JSX type file, and you have the template along with a script section, and just telling it that setup is it's a life cycle. You can actually have different life cycles, but setup is where you want to capture any of your data that you're going to be presenting when the template is generated. And then we've got two sections here, one for adventures, one for articles. The name of the file is important with the brackets around here. That means it's going to capture, and I'll show you this, but the capture ID, and then you can actually use ID within your template to be, the ID is the slug for, when we go to a path that's /adventure/ Gordon's favorite adventure, then favorite adventure would come in the ID channel, and then it's being able to be used within the template here. There's we've got the script section here, and in here there's this confirm is for, we hook it up with an event listener up here with an @click. Yeah, right here. That's a view attribute to be able to put your event handlers in, and we get these very items. The ones that really, so this is where it really comes in, is this is where we're doing our queries to AM, and it's a GraphQL. We're executing a saved query and doing it as a get, and then we'll get the JSON coming back, and then we can use the JSON up here within our template to be able to populate the data. Again, with articles, it's same thing. An ID. You can think of this as for each individual item within the list, and then the index is for listing out all of the articles. So now that we've got that, the setup is we have a Tailwind config. We have a TypeScript config, which just extends one that Nuxt has a default one. You can extend it, and then we have some Nuxt configuration here. This is where we can set some environment variables and whatnot, and then that's all there is to set up your application using Yarn, and we can do Yarn dev, which will start the dev server, and now our content's available on localhost 3000. So we should be able to go here. And our site, this site, again, it's being hosted, pulled in from a Node.js server. We have many links here that we can use. Go to Book Now if we want to see the adventures. And these adventures all were pulled in from AM. And you can see these here. What we're with Graph Query Editor, we're using a persistent query, articles all. And when we pull that, we're getting this data here. The data is the article, the items we have passed to the images and title, slug, this kind of information. We also have author information, and this brings back the whole list of items here. And that's what's populating this here. We can go to book, put in your name, and then your purchase has been confirmed. You can also go to the articles, and these articles, again, these are all pulled in from AM. And every time we go to the page, we're making that GraphQL query and pulling this information in, and you can drill down into all of this information come directly out of the content fragment on AM. So that in itself can be helpful, but where the magic truly starts is when we use that to generate a static site. So we can do Yarn generate, and what's happening here is the server is going through, it's pulling those queries on the server side and generating individual HTML and JavaScript pages for all of those routes. And you can see here, you can see all of the ones that it's pulled down, generating all of these files. Everything's then in a .output directory, and under public, you can see that we have our HTML and JavaScript, as well as the styling. We can run this in an HTTP server. And then we should be able to go to localhost 8080. And we have the same site. Now, what's different about this site is, and you see how fast it is, we're not doing any round trips to the server at all. Everything here is self-contained within the .output directory. And again, it's more secure. There's a lot of different ways that we can use this, but it's not the end all be all. Not every Not every problem fits JAMStack, but there's a lot of them that do. And this is great when we want to do it locally, but we should be able to do that as well. The same thing pushed out to Amazon. This is our same application, and it's hosted on Amplify on AWS. And we can go through, it's pulling this information all out of S3. And this has all been generated at compile time. And you notice that we don't have the button here. That's because I added that before we did this. So if we wanted to update what's sitting out on, want to update what's on AWS, we would just go over to here, stop our HTTP server. We can do a amplify publish. It's going to pull all the information we had in the .output directory and then push that out to S3 to AWS so that everybody could take a look at that. My fingers crossed that nothing's changed on Amplify since the last time I pushed. And it's gone through and it's doing a generate just so that we make sure that we have the latest content. And then we pulled the latest content from AWS, I'm from AM, excuse me, and then we had the latest code in place. And now it's going to deploy those to Amplify. And then we should be able to see a difference. Usually this can be fast. You never know. So there was an issue with the push. So, but you can, we can push that at a later date.
Hey, Gordon.
Yeah.
Hey, does JAMStack has hybrid pages where, for example, static site generated pages plus server-side rendering?
Yes, yeah. You can actually do a hybrid approach. Now, in Nuxt, when you can tell it when you want to pull the information. So, for instance, here, that's a good question. So, here we're using use fetch, and it's within a setup area, but you can actually tell it that you want it to be client side and not server side. And I think with TypeScript, it's like use our client only, something like that. But that way, the server will ignore it, but then it'll be, on the client side, you'll have that data there, and it'll be able to do that. Now, again,
Awesome.
when you're talking about that, since this is doing a generation, and it's determining what the routes are and generating those, you want to make sure that you're pulling the data you need in order to have your routes, if at all possible, have those on the server side. But then when you go to fetch, more detailed data, then you can do something on the server, on the client side. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally. Okay. Thanks.
Sure.
Yeah, because I am a little bit related with Vercel and Next.js, and I do know they have some hybrid approach where when you fetch a page, for example, you can also do some server-side rendering fetch to another maybe CMS that you might be consuming.
Yeah, and so there's multiple different levels of that too. So what I'm showing you is where everything's on the front end and it's all static, but you can do a hybrid approach where it's the part of your application that never changes, that's static, but then you get dynamic data when you need it. And then there's a third approach where you can have a server, and so some of the rendering can still happen on a server. but for that, you're adding another server within your stack. So yeah, good question. There's a lot of different ways that you can utilize it. And part of that is if you have the static versions of your site, since it's static with Jam, that's less code that you have to worry about somebody trying to, security-wise, somebody trying to hack into. Cool. Any other questions on that? That kind of boils down into best practices. So you want to identify what parts of your application you want to be static and what parts of you want to be dynamic. Decide if you want the images hosted, or that's something that AM does really well, being able to host the images, especially with the geometry that you need for whatever screen that you're presenting to. You want to pre-render as much content as you can. Use the static site generator where you can, and the CDN deliver that. And it kind of forces you to have an API first approach, so you can delineate instead of because you're always thinking of where you're getting your data and when you want to get it. And version control and pipelines, everything and then using a headless CMS. Now you're jamming. Actually, got a little music. No. Any questions?
That's great. I love the music part.
Yeah. Yeah, I needed to get it into the slide, but
Right. Cool. Yeah, I mean, if anyone have any question, I think we can follow up by email. I will send a follow-up email about this talk with the recording and everything. So feel free to respond to that with any question, and we can help. Well, Gordon can help with that.
Yeah, there's a lot of information in here, a lot of things we used. If you have any questions, let me know.
I think
everything's on.
Luca has his.
Oh, okay.
Luca has his hand up. Luca?
Hi. I'm trying to find any documentation on how to exploit JAMStack with AM. Have you some available? Some documentation available to share?
Yeah, that's a good question. That there isn't. I don't think anybody's done it. That may be an article I need to push out. But what I can. So for JAMStack itself, there's a lot of information on how to use JAMStack here, and this, I showed 3 main stacks, but there's tons of different generators here, and you can take and see if there's anything there. Headless CMS, these are other CMSs that you can use other than AEM, and there may be some documentation showing that. There's a little bit of documentation on using the GraphQL interface to Adobe, and that's another point. So in this example, I use GraphQL because it's easy to set up. I had that available, but nothing prevents you from using Sling models in order to get the data from AEM. So you could actually have a Sling model that's reading the content fragments and generating JSON. Anything that you can generate JSON or XML and have an API to do that, you've got a lot of freedom there. This just seemed to be a really good way to do it.
So the connection point in between JAMStack and AM is AM providing an API for JAMStack. in any way, let's say.
Yes, yes. So, and here's the persistent query, and on the JAMStack side, what we're using is this here is use fetch. What it does is it's a Nuxt wrapper around the HTTP, the front end fetch, and so we're using this endpoint here, and it's a get. We're not passing anything other than basic authorization for the credentials, and then what's being returned is JSON. Let me see if I got a Postman. You could do the same thing with Postman and get the data from AEM. Yep. So here again, the AEM scheme, the host, GraphQL is the endpoint mapped in AEM for being able to run those queries, and then that returns us back. This is a post. This is not the one. It's not the same one. I'm actually just filtering it by. I'm getting the particular information for Alaskan Adventures. But yeah, if any API like that you can use within JAMStack. That help?
Yes. Yeah, I'm thinking about the fact that the potential of IAM of providing all the parts that allows to create templates and pages through components and then allow editing the content and all this stuff is a bit put apart, and it's up to who is designing the front end, in this case, using other, let's say, JavaScript frameworks that runs well in JAMStack. So let's say that any application, any framework, Java framework or whatever server-side framework that is able to provide an API to JAMStack, then is a potential candidate for being
Yep, absolutely. REST APIs work particularly well, but it doesn't have to be REST, and it doesn't have to be JSON. It can be XML. It could be it could be a proprietary. What you're doing is defining where you want to pull that data, and right here we use the HTTP, use fetch, but you could actually you could pull this out of I forgot, it's not an iWorker. It's a different port that you can have a direct API into a server and be able to. You could even put, if you really wanted to get sophisticated, you could actually put these where you want more dynamic data. You could put these on a service worker and be able to have the server push changes to the client, and then since these, that's one of the things that within Vue, this data is reactive. So when there's changes to the data, if you make changes to this data, you can actually have the front end automatically updated. So I can see where you use a service worker and be able to pull data from or get push data from a server and then push it into the article list, and that updating your front end. There's a lot of different directions you go, and little nuances to how you use it.
Just to be conscious
Thanks,
about
thanks for sharing.
Sure.
And I think that's a great idea about the blog post. That could be a good one, good idea.
Yeah.
To share this in the blog post.
Yeah, because there's not much there.
Yeah, exactly. Cool. Thank you, everyone, and we'll follow up by email or by chat. Have a good day, everyone. Thank you, Gordon, for this really good stuff.
Yeah. Sure.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye, guys.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you. You
Bye.
too. Bye.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.